Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to objectively unpack a highly impassioned spiritual speech, 1991. It's a fascinating case study in how charismatic rhetoric is actually used to mobilize a massive group of people. It completely blends this deep internal spiritual philosophy with a super urgent call for global action. The sheer, staggering ambition of this text gives us a remarkable window into the exact anatomy of a spiritual revolution. So let's just dive right in. Here is our quick roadmap for today. We'll cover the 1991 Miracle Declaration, finding courage in a crisis era, viewing humans as divine children, the true meaning of faith, and finally, the dawn of a new Genesis. Section 1. The 1991 Miracle Declaration, setting the stage. This source material marks an incredibly dramatic moment. The speaker takes the stage and boldly declares a departure to the miracle, telling the crowd that after a decade of waiting, the time has finally come. And the ideological framing here, it's just incredibly audacious. The text draws this really sharp, deliberate contrast between secular leadership and spiritual ambition. The speaker actually brings up Mikhail Gorbachev, who, remember, was at the absolute height of his global influence at the time, and points out that while a political leader might define politics as the art of the possible, religion operates on a totally different plane. Religion, the speaker asserts, is a challenge to the infinite. This immediately sets the scale for the movement. They are absolutely not bound by worldly political limitations. To execute this infinite challenge, the speaker turns to their existing base. Addressing a membership of about 300,000 people, the speaker basically tells them that they are a chosen few. But they aren't meant to just keep this enlightenment to themselves. The text makes it absolutely clear that out of the roughly 5.3 billion people on Earth back then, these 300,000 have the immense responsibility to step up as leaders. They are tasked with guiding the billions of people who are supposedly living in complete darkness and confusion. Section 2. Courage in a crisis era. Shifting the narrative. You have to remember the context of the early 90s. It was a time of massive geopolitical shifts, and cultural anxieties about the end of the 20th century were running incredibly high. The speech openly acknowledges the era's apocalyptic prophecies. You know, the deep fears of war, natural disasters, societal collapse, the whole shebang. But it demands a complete psychological pivot from the audience. It's honestly amazing how the speaker outright demands that followers completely refuse to live in fear. They can't just try to avoid these crises. Instead, their explicit mandate is to act as proactive leaders who offer real courage and hope to humanity. They are essentially positioned as the ultimate antidote to global despair. Section 3. Humans as divine children, a philosophical pillar. So you might be wondering, how exactly are they supposed to lead with such unshakable courage? Well, to understand that, we have to unpack their core philosophy about human nature. The speaker vehemently rejects a materialistic worldview. In fact, he mocks the idea that human value is tied to a physical lifespan. He playfully compares our worldly worth to a car's mileage or, get this, a temporary, rotting 10-year wooden shed. Instead, he asserts that humans are eternal, pure, diamond-like souls. Fundamentally, they are children of the divine. And this isn't just a nice metaphor in the text. It's treated as absolute truth, a reality that should completely change how you operate in the world. According to this text, life on Earth is not a permanent state. It isn't the whole story of human existence. The physical world is described, actually pretty practically, as a temporary classroom. It's an educational training ground, chosen for spiritual growth before the soul inevitably returns to the divine realm. Because of this, the speaker argues that clinging solely to worldly desires or living in fear of physical death is a fundamental misunderstanding of reality. Section 4. The true meaning of faith. Breaking the wall. Now, what's really fascinating here is how the text completely redefines a word we use all the time. Faith isn't framed as just some passive belief or nodding your head in agreement. It's described as literally breaking through a dimensional wall to become completely one with a divine parent. It's an active, totally unbreakable bond. The speaker emphatically states that no worldly philosophy and no societal standard has the right or the power to sever this fundamental parent-child bond between the divine and humanity. So the path to true happiness within this framework is highly specific. First, it requires a conscious rejection of secular mirages, those materialistic desires that distract the soul. Next, you have to actively recognize your own inherent diamond-like divine nature. And finally, the ultimate goal is to unify your everyday thoughts and actions entirely with divine will.
Happiness, they argue, isn't found in worldly comfort, but in total spiritual alignment.
Section 5. A new Genesis begins. The call to action. Okay, this is where that deeply internal theology translates into staggering real-world ambitions. The internal realization becomes a massive external mandate. The speaker poses this implicit question to the audience, explaining why the divine supposedly chose their specific geography to kick off this new Genesis. Why Japan? Why rely on this small island nation to lead a worldwide revolution?
The answer the text provides is fascinatingly provocative. Let's look at the context of 1991. You had massive global superpowers, China with over 1 billion people, the USA with 250 million, the massive USSR, and India. Yet the speaker states very clearly that the divine bypassed all of these massive populations, choosing instead Japan, and specifically modern Tokyo, as the New Jerusalem. It is declared the epicenter of a new Genesis, tasked with sparking a worldwide spiritual revolution before modern civilization, which the speaker claims is losing its foundational pillars, inevitably collapses.
To make this happen, followers are given this incredibly vivid, beautiful metaphor. They're told, "You are a lighthouse." The act of spreading their message, evangelism, is completely stripped of any negative, pushy connotation and reframed simply as an act of profound love. It's described as lighting a candle for someone wandering in the dark. The text stresses that if you know people are divine beings, but you let them live like temporary material objects, you are doing them a terrible disservice. Lighting their flame is your ultimate duty. And they intend to light these candles incredibly fast. To achieve this new Genesis, the speaker outlines what he calls the miracle dash. It's an unbelievably rapid timeline to mobilize millions of people, starting right then and there. The goal? Create 1 million producers of happiness by the end of that very year, 1991. Then expand to 3 million by 1992 and reach 10 million shortly after that to launch a full global expansion. The speaker openly acknowledges that society will probably laugh at a small group aiming for such massive numbers, but he fiercely commands his audience to completely ignore the ridicule and let their actions prove their truth. Which brings us to the core tension of this entire text. We'll leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. This explainer reveals a worldview that challenges its audience to take a deeply internal realization and turn it into an urgent worldwide reality. It asks us to consider the sheer power of narrative. Think about it. If a group of people fundamentally believe they are eternal souls, tasked with saving a collapsing world from the center of a modern Jerusalem, how does that absolute conviction change the course of their lives and potentially the world around them? Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer of a truly fascinating historical declaration.